And I think in all of our struggles and trials, at some point when we're done asking why, we're done crying about it, we have to start asking, well, what do you want me to do with this?
Welcome to this episode of The French Press. Let me pour you a cup of coffee while we talk about intrigues of faith, pages we've dog-eared, and the life in between on The French Press.
Welcome back to another episode of The French Press. Today I have quite a few books I'm going to talk about. I've started several more. I want to wrap up a couple. I always have all these plans. I keep tons of journals. So I have a journal that's just dedicated to my notes and thoughts about these books and what I will probably talk about on the podcast. And I take all these notes and I read them over. And then I set up my very elaborate sound booth, which involves blankets and pillows. And then I have to bring in lighting. Then I have all these books, but there's not really room. So I have to close them and then re-find where I am. And as soon as I sit down and see the little record button going, I think I forget everything I was going to talk about. So then I have to completely rely on the Holy Spirit and kind of be like, okay, what should I talk about? So we'll see where it goes today. It always surprises me. I'm probably the most surprised at what I end up talking about or not talking about. I'm trying to just be faithful in going forward and working on it and hoping I'm getting better, but it's unclear sometimes. I was actually asked to give a little talk at my church recently, and I thought, oh, this will be so great. I'm going to have an actual audience, because usually I'm doing this podcast and I'm staring at a blanket and looking down at the floor at all these books, and there's no one around but me and Scout. And I thought I would really enjoy having an audience, because when I first started doing the podcast, that was maybe the harder part, was just I'm speaking to no one. I'm speaking to the air. And I think I've gotten used to that. And it was actually hard to speak to people and have to make eye contact and look for the audience reaction. And it's made me appreciate the podcast more, because there's no reaction. I can say what I want and then freak out about it later, which is what I do. Speaking of which, I gave this little talk at my church. I did it on journaling, because I love to journal. I love journals. I have a million of them. I actually have a hard time using them because I love an empty journal. I want it to be clean and perfect with no mistakes on it. And I think I talk about this in the pilot, if you want to go back and listen to that, if you haven't. In the first episode, I talk about how I didn't want to mark up books, and now I mark them up all the time. If you've lent me a book, I'm going to ask you if I can mark it up, and you're allowed to say no. And then it's really hard, and I have to use all these stickies and notes, and I'm like, oh, what does this mean? And at this point, I really just want to underline in books. Obviously, I can't with the library, which is why I love the free library, because I can mark those books up. And I find myself wanting to mark up books and now using journals, where prior to this, I didn't want to mark anything up. In the first episode, I liken this to not wanting to mark up our lives, not wanting to make mistakes. It's in many ways easier not to try to do something new or hard or uncomfortable, because you probably will mess it up. And then there it is. And if you don't do it at all, you're like a clean, perfect journal with nothing written in it, no wrong colored ink or rips or tears, nothing's misspelled, you didn't spill coffee on it. It's just this pristine book. And when I moved, 3 times ago, I remember I packed up a box of unused journals. I have a whole box in storage right now as we speak of unused journals that I didn't want to use because they're so beautiful and I love them and I didn't want to mark them up. And that is it's just an interesting image in my head to have this box of unmarked journals that are now sitting in storage. No one's looking at them. They're getting probably musty, possibly getting water damage. Who knows what's happening to them? Will I ever even find them again? They seem lost and maybe a little pointless. And I think of that with our lives, right? If we're not marking up our lives, if we're not doing things that are uncomfortable and trying things and being willing to fail and being willing to say, hey, I didn't do a great job at that. Let me try again. What's the point in a way? Like, we're just putting these beautiful journals in storage. It would have been better if I just used them at this point. And it's something I kind of struggle with in life. And I'm working on that through the podcast. By doing this, I'm, doing things that I find like, oh, maybe don't listen to it. It's kind of embarrassing. Yeah, I feel like the Lord has told me I have to tell people I'm doing it. Like, tell people you have a podcast, even though it's not perfect in what I would want it to be right now. And speaking of that talk I did at the church, I actually like public speaking, which I know is weird, and I hate flying. They say you either are more afraid of flying or public speaking, and I'm definitely more afraid of flying. I like to public speak or do public speaking, but I was really struggling with this one. I hadn't done it in a long time, and I was surprised how much I struggled in it. Maybe I'm rusty because I just hadn't done it in a while, and it didn't go as great as I would have envisioned it or liked it to have. I forgot a lot of things, and I ended up getting a horrible headache, and I had to work through this headache, which was really probably why it didn't go well. And I prayed on the way there, and I was getting this headache, and I was, praying that the Lord would take this headache from me. But I was also praying that he would use me and I wouldn't get in the way. And I was very much in the way. Like, as I'm driving to go give this talk, I'm telling the Lord, oh, I'm fully in the way. I'm very worried about what I'm going to say, how I'm going to be perceived. Where am I going to sit? What do I do first? What do I do last? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And I couldn't get myself out of the way, even on the drive there. And so I don't know, for whatever reason, that headache got a lot worse. And I felt really almost ill while I was giving the talk from this headache. And I don't know if that was part of it, if the Lord was like, yep, this isn't going to be about you. You're not going to look good. You're going to be able to hardly make eye contact because your head hurts. You're going to get lost in your notes. I'm not sure what that all was about. And the headache went away almost afterwards, which is suspicious. So I hope I get another chance to kind of do a do-over and try it again and do better. But it was definitely a moment of feeling like I didn't do my best and I could have done better, and I struggle with that. But then I think of that box of empty journals, and they're really pointless. No one's using them. No one's looking at them. They're probably getting ruined. And it's better to try things, and it's better to say, hey, that wasn't great. I hope I can try again someday and do it again. I think the talk went okay. Actually, a friend asked me to give the talk at her church. So there must have been something good in it, but it wasn't what I wanted it to be. And so if that works out and I do it again, I hope it goes better. So in all that, I just encourage you to try uncomfortable things. Maybe you're uncomfortable reading the Bible because you don't understand it. You're like, I read it, I don't really get it. It's confusing. I don't understand the culture. I don't understand the references. But the more you do it, the more you'll understand. As you use commentary, as you ask questions, as you ask the Holy Spirit to interpret for you. Or maybe you feel like you're not great at prayer. You don't know what to pray after 5 minutes, and then you just sit there awkwardly. But just reading books on prayer, asking people who spend a lot of time in prayer, like, what do you do? And also, I think reading the Psalms is prayer, or reading scripture is prayer. When I first started doing longer prayers, I actually would listen to people on podcasts, and they would be like, all right, we're going to do this long prayer together. Just repeat after me. And I actually think I was being trained during that time. I didn't realize it because I just thought, well, I don't know how to pray very well, so I'll just say exactly what this person's saying. And I think it was actually training me. So whatever that looks like, whatever you're uncomfortable with, maybe it's someone's asked you to, I don't know, do a little thing in the children's ministry or in the teen ministry, or, maybe you'd like to go to senior living homes and talk with these people, spend time with them, but you're nervous and you don't know what to say. Or there's someone at work or someone in your life that the Lord keeps putting on your heart and you're not sure what to do exactly. And maybe the first time it's not great. Maybe you ask them for coffee and you say something, you're like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that, or that was too much, or I didn't know what to say and it felt awkward. And I think it's very easy to want to quit then. like after that talk I just gave, I think, well, let's never do that again. But that goes against everything I'm trying to do here, which is to be uncomfortable and to try things and to try them again and to get better at them. So anyways, I wanted to start with that. And so I now have journals full of notes. Lots of things are misspelled. There's lots of things I can't read. I've definitely spilled coffee on the pages. I use stickers and bookmarks and sticky notes, and I mark them up. Maybe too much now. So I have these journals and I have all these notes, and I was looking at what I was going to talk about today. And I actually had to get my journal its own journal. So I have like my normal journal with all my notes. And then I have a little baby journal that is an outline of my big journal. So now I have two journals. So I'm going to try to follow these little notes of my journal's journal, because my journal is not afraid to mark up a journal. Like, he is like, we got to get organized. Give me a journal. Maybe not last time, but I think the time before I had talked about John Wesley, or maybe it was last time, because apparently I can't keep track of these things. And I wanted to just wrap that up. I finished the John Wesley book. I think I said before, I find him kind of controversial. I cannot quite settle on how I feel about him. I liked a lot of things he did, other things I did not like. If you read his story, I think you would see those things as you read through. And I have to keep reminding myself that he's just a person. He's not perfect. He made mistakes, just like I have on this podcast already, just like I did in my talk the other day, like I will in my future endeavors, and have a lot of grace with him and not hold him up to be anybody that was necessarily more special or less special. God just used him in different ways. So I do recommend the book. I did find it interesting. I wanted to keep reading it. And I'm going to just wrap up with one last thought from him, and we're going to be done with John Wesley. Although I have to tell you, this will come up later, he keeps coming up all the time. Like in other books I'm reading, other things I see and hear, it's like, oh, that's John Wesley. That's John Wesley's mother. So that's kind of weird. But I wanted to end with, this is after George Whitefield dies. So they're friends, and this is at George Whitefield's funeral. And at this point, John Wesley's pretty old, and he's starting to think about the end of life. And I just really like this quote that he had, which apparently was one of George's sayings. So I'm actually quoting John Wesley, quoting George Whitefield. But he said, "We are immortal till our work is done." Obviously, George Whitefield's work was done, and John Wesley wondered how much more time God would grant him. And I really like that thought. Like, we are immortal till God says we're not. You know, nothing can change that. And we have been given work to do. We're not saved on our works. We're not valuable because of our works. But we have been invited to do good works, to serve other people, to serve the Lord. And time is short, and we don't know how much time we have. And so that was just, I thought, a great ending to that book of just, Lord, help us to do what you want us to do. If there's something that's in the back of your mind, kind of like, you know, bothering you, like, gosh, I really feel like I'm supposed to do this thing, whatever it is, spend more time with the Lord, you know, raise my children differently with more of a biblical outlook, you know, speak to these people, do evangelist work, do ministry work. And maybe it's just, I'm supposed to bake cookies and bring them to people and spend time with them. You know, it could be something really small and simple or something really big. Whatever it is, that I just encourage you to do it, even though it'll be messy and you'll make mistakes and you'll spell things wrong and you'll spill coffee and you might not feel good and you might get a headache, and you just kind of go through it and ask for another chance. Can I do it again? Because that wasn't great. And maybe in the Lord's grace, he will be like, yep, that was just your first time out the door. Looks like you're going to really need me. In case you didn't think so before, you're for sure knowing now. And that actually brings me into I'm going back now to starting today, which is a devotional I have been reading the whole time I've been doing this podcast. It's actually, again, back to that pilot episode, weirdly. It's the first book I talk about, and it's one I found in the free library. And I'm going to share another one of these with you. I've shared several, and there's so many good ones. And actually, several of you have told me you've bought this book. And after that not perfect talk I gave, I actually had several people reach out and ask what books I used, because I talked about journaling and books. And this was one, people asked about. What book was that? So I'm excited that you guys are liking this book. So this is day 76, and it's called Little Help. And it's about a dad and a father, and they're taking a walk, and they are on a trail, and they come across a spot in the trail where there's like a boulder, a rock fell, kind of blocking the path. And the father says to the boy, "Do you think you could move that rock?" And the boy says to the father, "Do you think I can move it?" And the father says, "If you use all the strength you have," replies the father, "I'm sure you can." So the young boy looked at the big stone, chose an angle of attack, and began pushing with all his might. He strained and grunted, summoning all the strength he had. He pushed and pushed, but the heavy rock refused to yield. With frustration obvious both on his face and in his voice, he turned to his dad and said, "You were wrong. I just can't do it." Squatting beside him so he could look his son square in the face, the father smiled and said, "No, son, you just haven't used all your strength yet. I'm right here with you, and you haven't asked me to help." So this really struck me. The little boy is trying to move this rock on his own, and he can't do it. So he's like, "Well, I can't do it." And the father is saying, "Well, you haven't used all your strength." And the fact that the Father, God, He's our strength. He's the one we ask for help. So when I prayed on the way to that talk, I was asking the Lord to help me, help me get out of the way, help it not be about me. And the results feel unclear to me because it didn't go the way I wanted it to, but maybe that's part of it. It definitely wasn't about me. If there's any good that came of it, it would have been the Lord. If any fruit came of that, it wasn't because I was so eloquent or I was so poised. I was battling a really bad headache and definitely got lost and didn't do my best that I could have done in my own strength. But I had asked him for help on the way in. So I do believe, even if it was just like one person, heard something that they needed to hear, that was God helping. So how often do we not use all our strength? How often do we do it on our own? Like that little boy, I just picture him trying to push this rock, just this little kid, and he can't do it. And how often do we do these things like, "God, I can't." Maybe you're having trouble with your kids. Maybe you have rebellious teenagers and you're like, "I just can't get this turned around. I don't know how to parent this." Or, "My marriage is struggling. I don't know how to work through this." Or, "Our finances are a mess." Or, "I don't know how to do ministry." Or, "This relationship's really messed up and I don't know how to fix it." Or, "I don't know how to forgive." Or, "I don't know how to read your word and understand you." And, whatever it is, are we using all our strength? Are we asking God to help us? And then, here's the kicker for me. What are the results? I had this result in my head. Like that talk, I was going to be poised and make great eye contact with the audience and be engaging and be exciting and dynamic. And I was none of those things. I was just trying to survive. Please don't get sick in front of these people. And that's not the result I wanted, clearly. And so that's interesting when you ask for help and maybe you have a result in mind. I want you to help, and here's how I want you to fix my marriage. Here's how I want you to get these kids back on track. Here's how I want my job to go. Here's how I want this podcast to sound and look. And when it comes out different, we're tempted to think, well, God didn't answer that, or He didn't help me. He didn't show up because it was in this particular way we wanted Him to. Which is going to bring me to my next book. And this one I might talk about for a little bit more than this one time. I started it just a tiny bit last time. It's called When God Doesn't Fix It by Laura Story. just a brief synopsis is she's a songwriter. She has a song called Blessings, maybe you've heard of it, that talks about how, what if our blessings look different? Or what if, the healing and the blessing are in the tears is kind of the idea. Her husband gets a brain tumor. They're praying, asking for healing, of course. And it doesn't turn out the way they want it to. He does survive. And while he lived, that's a huge answer to prayer, but I want him back to normal. And I'm not sure, I haven't quite finished it, so I don't quite know where it ends, but so far in the story, he's not fully back to normal. He's very functional, but he probably can't work a normal job. He's not allowed to drive. So she didn't see her life being like this kind of caretaker of her husband who can't drive and can't work a normal job. And she's working full time. And it's just not how they saw their lives looking. And she makes just a lot of really great points in this book. And I really liked it. I highly suggest it. And she has to really grapple with, she had a plan for her life and it turned out really different. And where is God in this? And what does that look like? I'm going to read a little part of it to you guys. So Martin is her husband. Martin and I had planned a perfect life, but God had interrupted our plans with what seemed like a much worse plan of his own. Have you ever felt that way? If God had just listened to you, things would have been okay. But now you are held captive by situations you never wanted to be in and can't seem to get out of by yourself. So then she's asking, where was God in all of this? And she says, we each have plans and dreams for our lives. We think we know what's best. If God just followed our plan, everything would be great. But God's intentions are so much grander than ours. We can't even fathom what he has planned for us. If you find yourself struggling in a situation you didn't see coming, consider it an opportunity to trust God. So she has a theme of, just being able to trust God in these struggles. And she doesn't do it well. She's not like, all right, I'm just going to trust God. This will be great. I mean, there's a lot of crying. There's a lot of doubt. There's a lot of fear, a lot of worry, which I found very relatable in the book. She has this message, but she's struggling through it in the book. I think you just see yourself in it. Like you ask for help. Help me with this, God. And he doesn't help you the way you wanted. And it's easy to then think, well, where were you? Why didn't I knew the best way for this to happen? It would have been so much better if I didn't have a headache, or it would have been so much better if this didn't happen in my marriage, or this didn't happen with this child or at work. Why would you let this happen? You could have stopped it. Why did it go this way? And part of it is we just live in a fallen, sinful world and these things happen. And that's a whole theological discussion that we don't have time for on this particular podcast. But God is a God of redemption. And we talked about that a lot when we did Ruth, and that he redeems and he pulls us out of these foreign fields. And we get into these situations, sometimes of our own making. Sometimes we're victims of other people's sin or just fallen world. And yet God is always drawing us back and always redeeming us and working things out. And this whole idea of trusting him through it is so hard. And that's felt like a theme in my life for a little bit of like, do I trust you? Do I trust you with this thing? You asked me to do this podcast and I'm doing it, but it's not perfect. It's not close to perfect. And yet I want to look at the good he has done in it. People are listening. You're listening right now. That's amazing. I am so thankful for each and every one of you that listen. I am thankful for the people that have come alongside with me. Some of you are really heavy hitters in this and you've really helped. And I'm thankful for the people that show up to things, to listen. If God's called you to do something, maybe it's to talk to someone or to minister to someone, they have to show up for it, right? And if he brings them to listen or to be blessed by you, there's a joy in that, even if it doesn't go perfectly. If you're like, I baked you these cookies and they got burnt, but here I am with these burnt cookies, and that person's still like, oh, please come in with your burnt cookies. They're better than no cookies. There's joy in that, in being the receiver and the giver. And it's this, relationships that we're in where we're like trying to bless other people and help other people, and then letting them bless us and help them back. Because that is the body. That's the church, right? We're working together, helping each other, and going outside and trying to bless other people outside of the church too. But in her book, she is just grappling with why God let this happen. And eventually she comes to a point of changing the question into, what can I do with it now? And I think in all of our struggles and trials, at some point when we're done asking why and we're done crying about it, we have to start asking, well, what do you want me to do with this? I'm going through this hard thing right now. Are you supposed to be digging a well as you go? So when the next person crosses this particular desert, there's water to drink. Like maybe you can say, oh, I went through that with my kid. It was awful. I didn't do it great, but I actually dug a few wells. These are a couple of things I learned. Can I come over and give you a drink of water in this? And maybe you can learn from my mistakes, or you can learn from what worked for me, or I can just go through it with you. Whatever that looks like. Are we digging wells as we walk through the desert? So people coming behind us can say, okay, I watched you do that hard thing in your life. I watched you forgive that person, or I watched you work through that thing, and I'd like to talk to you about it. And you're able to offer them advice. And we often learn more from people's mistakes than we do from their successes, right? Because success can look like, well, you did it great and I'm not. So, but if you're like, oh, I see that you gave that talk and it wasn't great, but you did it anyways, or you're doing this podcast and it could be better, but you're still doing it. Maybe that encourages someone else to be like, well, I think I'm supposed to do this. And, if we're just digging those wells and encouraging people and willing to put our mistakes out there. In the book, she talks about how she doesn't want to tell people about their struggles because they're not through them yet. There isn't a happy ending. And I don't know if there is at the end of the book, but so far there's not this happy ending of, yep, he's all better and he's right back to his old self. And now he's working and driving and, we're living this life we thought we would have. And she struggled to want to share that with people because she didn't have a happy ending. And I think sometimes in our stories, we feel that too. Like, well, I don't know how this kid's going to turn out yet, or I don't know if this marriage is going to make it, or man, this job, I don't know, I might get fired or laid off, or, our finances look really bad. We might have to ask for help. And so we haven't figured these things out yet. Or I started this ministry and no one came, or I started this ministry and I'm a little lost in it. I don't know, whatever it is you're kind of looking at, it's hard to tell that story when it doesn't have a happy ending. And so she really encourages you in the book to share the hard parts, share the trials, because God uses those. There isn't always a happy ending. We know this, at least here on earth. But there is a happy ending. There's a perfect ending in heaven. And that's ultimately what we're offering people anyways. You might be able to say, hey, I can come over and go through your finances with you and help you with your taxes, and we can get this on track and figure it out. Or you might be able to say, hey, I have some parenting thoughts. Do you want to hear them? And that might change the tide of your life, whatever it is you're looking at. And those things are great, but it might not too, right? And you might just kind of struggle through something. And so ultimately, when we're offering someone kind of help in the physical sense, really what we're doing is pointing to the glory of God. And we're saying, hey, here's some biblical principles you could apply to these situations. But ultimately, we're looking at eternity and we're looking at our heart. And where is our heart in this struggle? Where is our heart in this trial? Are we bitter? Are we blaming others? Do we have a victim mentality? Are we angry? And you have seasons of this, certainly, but are we willing to come out of them? Are we willing to mature past them and say, okay, God, even though I'm in this struggle, I still love you and I still serve you and I still know you're good and I still trust you. And we all want a happy ending, but maybe we need to look for the little blessings along the way. And she starts to do that in the book where she's like, okay, I'm waiting on this big answer or this big breakthrough, and it could take a long time, but there's a lot of little things along the way. And so since I talked about that talk I gave at my church way more than I planned to, I don't think I planned to at all. So that's interesting. There were little things, people did say things to me that encouraged me, that said, like my friend that said, I want to have this talk at my church. That's wild. That's wild. Really? This one I just gave? That doesn't even make sense to me. Or other people said things to me like, I think you should do something with public speaking. Really? Based off this talk? That's wild. So those are blessings. I treasure them in my heart. I take them in. So look for those in whatever you're struggling through or whatever you're called to. And it's going messy or it's not perfect or you haven't even started it yet and you're going to start it and you're going to open that empty journal and those clean, crisp, perfect pages that you don't want to mess up, you're going to grab a pen and you're going to write something down and it's maybe going to be spelled wrong or the ink is going to get weird and you might rip the page and then you're going to be tempted to say, well, see, I ruined this book. But that's not the point. The point is, see, I'm using this book. It's not sitting in a storage unit. It's sitting on my desk and I open it up and I write in it. And whatever that looks like, I'm going to spend time with God and I don't quite know what that looks like. And I'm going to ask someone's help and I'm going to change my family life. I'm going to change my work life. I'm going to do whatever God's calling me to do. And it might be something small or something big. It doesn't matter. But I'm going to open the page and I'm going to start messing these pages up. I'm going to write in them and underline them and use stickers. And I'm going to use this life. I'm going to use this life to bring God glory, even the hard parts, maybe especially the hard parts. Well, I plan to talk about a lot more than this today, but I see I'm already running out of time. So I will be consulting my big journal and its baby journal next time and try to hit some more of these books I started. And I look forward to talking to you guys next time.
I'm so glad you joined me today on the French Press. If you liked what you heard, you should follow me. That way you'll get all the latest episodes. And if you wouldn't mind taking a minute to rate the show. Also, if you'd like to follow my blog, The Demi-Toss Drafts, I have a link below in the show notes. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook. Anytime you can leave a like, comment, reshare a post. All these help my ministry get more traction. The most important thing you can do is pray. I really appreciate all of your support. Thank you for sharing a French press with me today.